Thank you very much. Well, I have been asked to try to offer you kind of a broad picture of why or what the role of regions could be in climate change policy. And I will try to stick to the 7-8 minutes that Anil was asking me to. I plan to do it in 10 minutes, but I will try to go really, really fast. But basically, I would like to cover these 3 points. I would like to give you an introduction, give you some examples and some final remarks. As an introduction, let me make this, now. As introduction, let me say that I believe that the IPCC 2007, together with the Stern report 2008, made really a change in the way climate policy was mainstreamed into the political agendas. And in fact, we tried to represent it in a figure like this, where we believe that before this period, 2006, 2008, there was a high political cost in terms of tension with other governmental policies of doing a good, ambitious climate policy. And after this point here, the top of this turning point, I think well, the situation completely changed, and this explains somehow also why some regions started to do very ambitious or much more ambitious climate policies. So basically, climate policies have to be designed and implemented at a global scale. We know that. That's one of the reasons we're here. But it's not only the case that, that it has to be at national scale. There are other levels of governance that are all very, very important. And this is something that is becoming widely recognized in this kind of fora. I mean, the text, in fact, that they are negotiating now, the last draft of the text that it was out yesterday, it does include a specific mention to regions in several parts of the text, and I think this is a very important step forward. So there is great potential of this level of governance, and why? Let me explain you why. First, because great proximity to citizens. I think this is quite obvious. Second hand, they have shown in the past greater flexibility to not only to design, but also to implement many of these policies successfully. They are in charge of many of the competencies that they are needed, in fact, to implement the policies, the climate policy. And this is connected to the next point, what we call the land target paradox, that in many regions in Europe especially, and some states in the United States, national governments are agreeing emission targets that ultimately are the regions the ones that they have to implement. So I think this is a very important strategic reason to include the regions in this climate change kind of overall global process somehow. And I would like to say also that the same way that climate impacts vary from region to region, it's important to highlight that the combination of institutions and instruments should also vary from region to region. Let me argue also that until very recently, it's true that we were seeing kind of adaptation like a very local thing, while mitigation was a more kind of global issue. I think this has changed a lot for many reasons. One of the reasons is that many regional and local governments, they are doing very effective mitigation policies these days. And in many instruments also, the national governments, they have lost part of their importance, like in the EU ETS, that there are no national allocation plans anymore, and the distribution now is a sectoral distribution. But there is also another good reason from my point of view, is that when you look at the impacts of most of the environmental policy has in the economic impact on some sectoral areas, the picture is completely different if you are looking at nations or countries, and whether you are looking at countries or you are looking at regions. And in fact, if you look at the most industrialized regions in Europe, the ones that they are going to be affected by or are being affected by EU ETS, the picture doesn't really reflect doesn't coincide with the national border, but it's more regional kind of borders. And it's the regional industrial policy often the one that should be adapted somehow to take into account these impacts. Transport, housing sector are sectors that emissions are still growing. These are sectors that they need, I think, quite localized policies, or they also need very localized policies. And as IPCC recognized, adaptation and mitigation should be both coordinated at all levels of governance. There are great examples. In the United States especially, I would say, we have great examples of things that some states are doing. Europe also, many regions are doing very interesting things. So what can they do? Well, they can network. That's one of the important things they can do. They can claim for recognition in international fora, and they have been doing, there are many regions that have been doing this for a long time, but they can also form this kind of association or clubs of those regions that are doing things well, that they really help engaging other regions in doing quite ambitious climate policy. And there are very good examples out there. Energy for SDs is one of the examples. The climate group is another network that is working very well. So there are very good examples out there. So they should actively participate, designing and implementing policies in coordination with national governments, and they should continue continue showing what they are capable of doing. There are very good examples, as I said. Let me just give you very briefly, we did a review that we are now updating a few years back together with Anil and another colleague, Mikkel, from the BC3, and we found that many regions, leading regions, they are doing a lot of things. They have taxes, they have rebates, they have loans, they have emission trading, they have voluntary agreements, they have standards, they have certification, labeling, they have prices and recognition, public-private partnerships, legislation, information. There are many things that regions can do, and there are many things that regions are actually doing. Let me just refer to one example, Compact of States and Regions. This is led by the Climate Group, and this is a report that it was just out, I think, a few weeks ago, and basically here you can see what, from my point of view, is a very good example of the things that regions can do. This is about commitment, regions committing to certain emission reduction targets, energy efficiency targets, but it's also about measuring and monitoring. This report is telling you what regions are doing, what regions are telling that they will be willing to do, and what regions are actually doing. And I think this is a great example. It already gathers 44 states. It's like 325 million people in the world and 80% of world GDP. And most importantly, I think it really complements very well with the UNN or the UNFCCC kind of global process, because it can really fit into this kind of more global structure. This is just a figure that you can see in their web page, but basically to illustrate that it fits very well with the global efforts, but it fits very well also with other local efforts. So let me just finish saying that I believe that climate change poses a great challenge also from the point of view of public policy. We have to have like decisive and quick responses. International negotiations are necessary, but we know they are not going to be enough. I mean, even if this meeting here, this COP21, is very successful, we know we are not going to achieve the 2 degrees Celsius scenario, so we need to have everyone else we can think of contributing to this goal. I think that unless efforts are coordinated, it's going to be very difficult, the effective implementation, even if those policies that could be agreed. There are many arguments that I have already showed and discussed with you. There are arguments against also not to include regions into a national process, but I think this can be answered and overcome, because I believe that regions can be effectively part of national delegations with attributed decision power, and they can also, it's possible to use existing networks as a seed of some more formal structures that could integrate state and regions into this kind of global process. As I said, there are many examples out there. It's very interesting to look at what the Climate Group is doing. I think that the United Nations in the actual text is recognizing the importance on regions, and just continue trying to implement all these instruments that are already out there. Thank you very much.